Hello everybody, this is Ragord with Team Truffle, and I'm continuing my Rogue-like series. This is another one in the vein of one of more Rogue-lite, as some people call it. It's not really sort of a dungeon crawl with, leveling up your individual skills and magic and trying not to starve and all those incredibly ridiculous things, but it still has that permadeath, really difficult. You have to learn the patterns of all of the enemies and what all the items do and how to sort of game the system, so to speak, to get this to work correctly. It's not procedurally generated in terms of levels, like a lot of things are, but I mean, it has, I think, 6 stages. Each of the stages has one of 2 options to choose from, and each of them has 2 or 3 layouts. So, I mean, it's sort of randomized every time you go. Where the loot is and what that loot is randomly, or I assume some procedurally generated, so in that sense it's still the same. So anyway, let's sort of delve in. This is more of it's a platform, it's an action platformer, where you just sort of have to defeat waves and waves and waves and waves of enemy and not die. It'll be very obvious once we sort of get into it, but so anyway, there's a lot of characters you can get into. Each of the characters has 4 skills, and the 4 skills that they have are very different for each character. You have the Commando, which I'll be playing. It's a very basic one that has a lot of ranged attacks and an ability to dodge attacks. But there are a lot of other ones, like the Sniper here is very low in mobility, but he does a lot of damage if you can sit and hit something. You've got, like, Handy here, who's sort of more of a melee character. He's a little more tanky, has a lot of healing in his kit that a lot of the other characters don't have. Then you have, like, the Huntress, which is, like, super mobile because she can actually move while attacking, which is something that no one really else can do. You have to sort of attack and move, or try to attack while jumping to try to game the system. But so anyway, the Commando is not necessarily the easiest to play, not necessarily the most likely to win. He's not in any way the most powerful, but he's one of the few you start with, and he's one of the simplest, so I'm going to get into that, because he's kind of easy to understand. So there's a couple of options of floors, I guess you can call them, that we could have started with. Dried Lake is one of them. Enemies will be randomly spawning. You see these, like, Lemurians is what these are called. They're just going to try to bite you. They're not very smart, they can't climb very high. We'll get into the combat in a second. This is a chest. I have gold in the top left corner, and defeating enemies and opening little containers like this one will give you gold. That'll also give me the little blue orbs. That's the experience, which you can see here. Experience will increase your base damage and health. Not really much else, though, but that's, I mean, obviously very useful, but it's very simplistic. You don't gain more skills, your skills don't gain more abilities or anything. Alright, so now we get into some combat. So, I have several different attacks I can get through. The first attack is always sort of a base attack that you can just sort of mash or hold the button, as most characters can do. All the other ones, when you use them, you can see that they go on some degree of a cooldown, which means you can't use them for a number of seconds. This is nothing particularly new. So anyway, the idea of the game is you're supposed to find the teleporter so you can get to the next stage, and you go from stage to stage to stage until you eventually get to the Temple of the Elders, which is more of a set decision, and that gives you to, I don't know what it's called, but it's sort of the grand teleporter that allows you to get to the final area, which is the UES Light, which is basically, well, I mean, basically the story of this was you were part of a storage ship, I think it was, that had a bunch of alien artifacts and transport and things that were going from one place to another, and you crashed on this planet. And so now you're surviving this wreckage, and you're trying to find your way back to the ship so that you can basically start it back up and leave. And so getting to each of the teleporters effectively gets you closer and closer. The very last one is the one that actually gets you where you want to go. And then you go to the UES Light, and you have to open your way through doors and fight through all the native inhabitants and that have gotten out. So anyway, I just opened that chest, and I got an item called an energy cell. It kind of gives a very nice description of what it is and a name. It appears for a long time. And at the bottom here will be a nice several rows of what items we currently have. this item is very self-explanatory. When you're at low health, I think like 30% or so, you attack fast. Very fast. It like almost doubles your attack speed or something. It's very useful. So this is the teleporter. I activated it. What this does is it spawns a boss, this big colossus dude, and then enemies will spawn much, much, much faster. And the idea is you have to survive this for 90 seconds as these things keep spawning and keep spawning and keep spawning, and then you have to, you know, kill everything that's left. Like, everything has to be dead before you can activate the teleporter. It'll spawn a certain number of enemies. Like, if I kill them now, it won't change the spawn rates or anything. I'm just sort of not attacking them because I'm sort of distracted. So the idea is you typically want to, well, just not. Really, the point is to not die and slowly wither away at their forces. Usually, I mean, at this first section, since they're going to keep coming, you usually want to move around a bit so they don't get incredibly grouped up, so you don't get into these areas where there's like 50 of them in a single area, and you can just like all attack once and kill you, because you don't have particularly much amount, especially not. So, okay, what else? So my skills, I have a basic attack. My basic attack is basically a double tap. Is what the idea is. Basically, my basic attack fires 2 shots. Each one is not particularly powerful, but it's 2 shots. So if I get any ability that triggers off of each attack, it'll trigger twice as often, basically. So that's sort of the benefit the character has. The second I have, I believe it's called Hollow Points. No, Full Metal Jacket. And the Full Metal Jacket is interesting because it pierces, so I can use it and it'll hit every enemy in a line. Doesn't stop after any number of enemies. You can hit 1,000 enemies. Not that there will be that many on the screen, but it will never stop. It doesn't do less damage per enemy, it just hits everyone. It's nice. It does more damage than my main attack, but it's got a... I mean, you can't use it all the time. It's got a cooldown. Alright, picked up another item, Hermit Scarf. I get a chance every time I get hit by something to just evade it, not get hit by it. It'll say evade. These guys are angry, you can see them. Anyway, so my third attack is a dodge roll. The dodge roll basically allows me to move, and then I don't take any damage while doing that movement. Which is very nice to get into big crowds like this. Movement can be a problem here. I can't get back that way without going the long way around, so it's kind of frustrating. This is a good example of on-hit effects. So the Harvester's Scythe, critical hits will heal me. So every hit I have has, I think it's, you start with like a 5% chance of critical hitting for double damage. When you pick up this item, it gives you an additional 5% or so. So now I have like a 1 in 10 chance every time I hit to deal double damage. You can see that sort of the number sort of comes up kind of outlined in red. It just sort of happened there. And whenever that happens, I get healed for 8 points. Since I have a double tap, that'll happen basically twice as often because I'm hitting twice as often. And it heals the same amount each time, even though I'm attacking twice as often. So, I mean, that's kind of nice. So the teleporter event is stopped, which now it'll tell me how many enemies are left, so now all I really have to do is sort of clear them all out. Earlier stages, they're not particularly difficult to do so. As you can see, enemies don't really jump gaps. The very big enemies, like those big crabs, can walk over these small segments here, and so there's a little bit of mobility that they have. But in general, you can usually just sort of avoid them by just sort of not being there. The really interesting thing that this game accounts for that a lot of other games don't, or it handles scaling difficulty in a way that you don't see very often. I had never seen it really before this. I've seen it in a couple of games since. And the idea is, in the top right corner, you can see this difficulty. This is not the difficulty I selected. The difficulty I selected is this little symbol up here. It sort of just determines, kind of like a multiplier for how difficult things are. What the difficulty is actually determined by is your time. And so you can see this bar is here, and this will fill up and fill up and fill up the longer and longer I take. And basically, the farther along it is, the items will cost more to pick up, but not be any better. and enemies will be more powerful. They'll have a little more health, they'll do a little more damage, and more enemies, more points worth of enemies will spawn. So harder enemies will spawn, or more numbers of enemies will spawn, however the game decides to do it, depending on very specific circumstances. And so, one thing about this game is, I mean, you can pause, so there's no, like, desperate need to be, like, on the edge of your seat, but you don't want to really be dilly-dallying. You know, like, I don't really want to go and pick up all the other loot in the rest of the level, because that'll take more time. Even though I have plenty of money for it, the difficulty will scale up. And although it's probably the better choice, I'm going to choose not to, and it's a choice. Especially in later levels, you might just want to finish the level quickly to keep the difficulty scale down lower. Getting the items may not be worth the additional difficulty, and that's an interesting way to do things. You don't necessarily need to speedrun everything, you don't have to leave everything behind, but it does mean you get a trade-off for trying to get everything on the level. Also, fighting enemies right now before the teleporter event, I'm just adding time to my timer, because the teleporter event is what really matters, and when that's done, you survive, you kill all the enemies, and leave. All the time I take before that is just extra time I'm adding on to it. And so I wouldn't say it's a rush, but you definitely are rewarded for trying to find it as soon as possible, and penalized for trying to sort of min-max and get every single item. And so it's the basic idea of the game here. Each of the enemies, not every single enemy, the majority of enemies have different varieties that you can see. You can see those, like, golems beneath me. Some of them are yellow, some of them are sort of a blackish, and one of them is green there. Those are elites, and elites, they're the same. They have the same sort of attack modes, and way they move, and their AI and everything. The difference is in some of their statistics, depending on their color. Green elites are, I forget, they're called vitality elites or something like that. I mean, I don't know the names for all of them, but the idea is they heal all the enemies around them, and they can get really annoying, because they actually heal a lot. Bosses can actually heal a large sum of health just by hanging out. The yellow ones are quick elites. They move much faster than the normal kin. You can see these yellow ones sort of outpacing the other ones. And they can teleport to you once the difficulty gets high enough. Or, yeah. So, that's another, like, they do other things. There's a fire elite somewhere there. You can, I don't know if it's supremely obvious, but there's like a fire trail following around at the bottom there. One of the enemies, sort of a orangish color, is a fire elite, and it makes that trail follow around it. It also does additional sort of burst fire damage when it attacks. There's a blue kind called electric elite, at least I call it that, and they do additional damage when they attack you, just like those fire ones, and they have this field around them, and when you're close to them, they have, every half second or so, they'll do like a burst of damage that does a very significant amount of damage. So they're usually want to take them out from afar or really quickly. And then there's the most annoying kind, the very last one, which are the blast elites, and they're more darker red color than the fire elites, more orangish. And the blast elites, they fire missiles at you, which is really annoying because the missiles do a lot of damage, and unlike, you see how none of those enemies are doing anything to me, because they can't climb, they can't jump. At this stage, the yellow one can't teleport, most of those can, so they can't really do anything to me until I get to their level. The missiles will fire at you as long as you're within range at any level. So that makes them far more annoying in some ways. So I'm not going to go into all the strategies or all the items that I'm picking up or anything. This is really just a general view of how this game is played, and sort of what the idea is and what you can expect. I think this is a really fun game. I am not very good at all. This is sort of the medium difficulty, and I don't think consistently win, and only on certain characters that I'm actually good at. So, there's a lot of difficulty, that kind of scaling that can go into if you actually get good at it, and you just put on a higher difficulty, and these characters you're not as good at, or you can even impose your own. I see a lot of YouTubers, they sort of impose their own challenges. They have challenges that like they can only pick up certain items, or they have to finish in a certain amount of time, things like that. This is a very unlike a lot of, like most, I would say, roguelikes. This is actually very action oriented, but it's very fun. And if this looks interesting to you at all, I would suggest picking it up. It's fairly cheap. There's multiplayer support for it. I get to do it. I don't have a lot of people that really want to play this game, but I've seen it. It works. It's nice. There's a lot of unlockables. I think you're the kind of person that likes that. The different characters, like you saw all of the characters there. You only have to start with like 4 of them. You have to unlock all the other ones with specific abilities. I guess we'll go into some of the minor parts of that right now while we end this video. Since I don't have much else to go for. The art is really neat. I wouldn't call it like just directly beautiful most of the time, although these sort of portrait bios of the monsters are like ridiculously amazing here. They're just awesome. Oh, that one's really creepy. Anyway, let's go back to the main menu. So here's the item log. I haven't even unlocked all of the items, but basically the idea is you have to, I mean, this is a list of all the items that are in the game, and these will randomly pop up. Some of the chests will drop any sort of tier. There's a white tier, green tier, red tier, and there's a use item tier, which is this orange one. It's sort of a separate thing, but they vary from good or bad within itself. Use item takes up a specific slot instead of being passive, which makes it different, but they're typically more powerful than any of the individual ones here, except maybe the red ones. So, it can tell you right here. So, one of the newer patches, they released 2 new characters. One of them, which is the chef. And so I have to flambe 20 sand crabs, or have 20 cleavers out at the same time to unlock these weapons. And I haven't done that yet because I haven't played enough since the last patch to be able to do this. It's just a thing. So anyway, there's each of these items can be unlocked with certain things. You can even go into, you click on the items to go into them, and it'll tell you a very nice specific of what this will do. This is kind of a bad example of that. A better example would be like this one. So this is the Brilliant Behemoth. Basically, all your attacks explode to do 20% damage to nearby enemies. So percent damage means you have a base damage stat. You don't get to see it within game, but it's there. And each character scales slightly differently, and it'll scale with your level. Your attack does not always do 100% damage. Like, for example, the Commandos does like 60 or something, but he just shoots twice. Handies does like 140 or something like that. And so these will do percentages based on your base damage stat, not your main attack stat. So it'll scale with your level. Here's your unlockables. It'll tell you your sort of statistics here, but here are your achievements. So all of these are unlockables. So I've unlocked most of the things in the game. But this will tell you how you unlock different characters, different items for each of the characters. There are character-specific items in the sense that you have to do something specifically with the characters to unlock an item, but that item can be used by anyone. Like, there is no item that will only work on certain people. And they just sort of come up randomly. Not a whole lot else to say about this. I'm trying to keep these a little shorter because they are just look-ats. If anyone has any particular interest in this, I can do runs of this and actually talk about strategies, or more specifically what the items do, or even how fun the game is. But this is just a general idea of what it is for people who are interested. Yeah, so this is just another sort of roguelike, sort of action platformy shoot 'em up game. I would recommend it to anyone who thinks it looks kind of interesting. It's worth it. I've loved not every minute, obviously, but I've loved playing this game. So anyway, please like and subscribe our videos. It helps us a lot. Our small channel really needs all of the publicity, so to speak, that we can get to get noticed. So if you like, please help us out, and then more people will find us out. So anyway, thank you for your time. Bye.